Good evening. I'm John Davis, a third-year medical student at the University of Texas Medical Branch.
And I am Candace Hebert, doctoral student in the UTMB School of Health Professions Occupational Therapy Program. We are happy to be here with you tonight representing UTMB, sponsor of Space Center Houston's Thought Leaders Lecture Series.
Tonight's lecture explores the rise of spaceports and the private companies that are collaborating and investing to bring space travel and exploration to private citizens. Much like these entrepreneurs are transforming the aerospace industry, UTMB students and faculty are collaborating and investing to transform healthcare in new and non-traditional settings. Instead of putting people in space, we're bringing medical services to neighborhoods right here at home, where it is most needed but least accessible.
John and I serve as directors of the St. Vincent's House Clinics in Galveston, run in the community by students and faculty from the UTMB Schools of Medicine, Nursing, and Health Professions. Our patients have life challenges and are often uninsured and underserved. Many suffer from relatively common ailments in advanced stages due to their difficulty in addressing basic needs like food and housing. For some, their physical ailments are compounded by mental health issues.
We provide free or reduced cost medical care of the highest quality to our patients. And our holistic approach to medicine recognizes the fulfillment of social needs can be as vital to a person's well-being as the proper prescription. So, we also address their mental health concerns, their food insecurity, their housing needs, and other social factors that help determine health. It's a transformative experience, not only for the patient, but also for the student.
John and I are honored to serve our patients at St. Vincent's House. We're excited to be a part of important changes in healthcare, in medical innovation, and transformation that mirror the exciting advances of aerospace. It's an exciting time to be in either profession.
Thank you for allowing us to share our passion for medicine and for making healthcare more accessible to those who need it. Now, let's sit back and hear about some other amazing work.
Hello, I'm William T. Harris, President and CEO of Space Center Houston, a dynamic science and space exploration learning destination and nonprofit science center. We also have the privilege of serving as the official visitor center for NASA Johnson Space Center. We share the story of human space exploration, past, present, and future, with more than 1.25 million visitors annually from around the world. Thank you for joining Space Center Houston's Thought Leaders Series program, Spaceports, Bringing Space to Your Community, presented by University of Texas Medical Branch. Our Thought Leader Series brings you space and science experts from across the nation who provide insights and perspectives on space exploration. Space Center Houston provides robust learning experiences that enable you to be part of NASA's mission. In addition to our robust collections, we provide new exhibits and live programming, so there's always something new. Experience our new fall exhibit, Be an Astronaut, now on exhibit until January 2nd, and celebrate Halloween at Galaxy Frights, presented by Reliant, every weekend in October. It's a family-friendly Halloween experience with costume parades, candy stations, and science activities. Space Center Houston's Galaxy Lights, presented by Reliant, returns for its third year. See Galaxy Lights transform and illuminate the center with stunning space-themed light installations, watch an incredible kinetic light show, and enjoy s'mores by the fire pit to celebrate the holiday season. Galaxy Lights is an immersive holiday lights tradition, bringing guests the most interactive and technologically advanced light display in Texas, nightly, November 13th through January 2nd. Plan your journey with us. You can purchase tickets in advance at spacecenter.org. Our Thought Leader series today focuses on spaceports. The ability for regular people to explore space is becoming more accessible. With advancements in reusable space technology and space tourism, regional spaceports could enable more opportunities to travel into low Earth orbit. Houston is home to a spaceport at Ellington Airport. In this episode, we'll learn more about the potential for spaceports and how they're being designed and discuss the future for these hubs of innovation. So excited to have you for this program, Spaceports Bringing Space to Your Community, presented by UTMB. I'm delighted to welcome our panelists, Scott McLaughlin, Spaceport America Executive Director, Andy Rechenberg, Deputy Manager for Kennedy Space Center's Configuration Management Program, and Cherie Matthews and Sangeetha Karthik, Spaceport Architects with Corgan. Scott McLaughlin is the Executive Director of the world's first purpose-built FAA-licensed commercial spaceport. Spaceport America It's amazing. Scott is a native of New Mexico and has worked in both the private and government sectors in New Mexico, Texas, and Colorado. In his previous role, he traveled the world installing, maintaining, and marketing specialized wind radar systems. His innovative designs support space launch, test ranges, aviation operations, weather service networks, atmospheric research, and shipboard-based wind measurements are among the many things that he has worked on. Andy Rechenberg is Deputy Manager for Kennedy Space Center's Configuration Management Program and is the Information Technology Liaison for the Gateway Program. In his spare time, Andy teaches group cycling and fitness classes and enjoys running half marathons and photography with his son, who lives in Ohio. NASA's Gateway will be an outpost orbiting the moon that provides vital support for a long-term human return to the lunar surface, as well as staging point for deep space exploration. Cherie Matthews is an architect and senior associate in the aviation studio at Corgan, a leading architecture and design firm founded more than 80 years ago. As a pioneer for innovative aviation design, Cherie partnered with Corgan's research and development arm to give shape to the spaceport, its buildings, networks, services, and experiences needed to support point-to-point rocket travel and commercial space travel. Sangeetha Karthik is an associate principal at Corgan. As a thought leader on career and technical education centers, Sangeetha has done extensive research on planning for the future through project-based learning environments. She's worked with many education clients to define and align career-based curriculum to meet the goals and needs of the clients as well as the market and region. She excels in creating spaces that mimic the real world, train collaboration, and are student-driven to foster engaged, self-directed learners that are aptly prepared for their future careers. Sangeetha is a licensed architect and interior designer in the state of Texas. Welcome to you all. Our panelists will now provide more information about their backgrounds and the scope of their work. Then we'll launch into our conversation, which I'm really excited about today. First, we'll hear from Scott McLaughlin. Scott.
Thank you, William. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the chance to talk about Spaceport America. I have a movie first, I think a video that just kind of shows what we've been up to in the last couple of years. I think that would be the best way to introduce the spaceport. right. Thank you. I think that video is always the best way to show something, but you can see we can do a lot with a spaceport. And so, excuse me. So what I'd like to do now real quick is go through some slides to kind of finish introducing the spaceport. The first slide here is our statutory mission. So Spaceport America was paid for by the New Mexico taxpayers. It was a partnership with Virgin Galactic, and Virgin Galactic is our first and foundational customer. And of course, everybody knows they're focused on space tourism, but I actually work for the state of New Mexico. I'm a state of New Mexico employee, and we work for something called the New Mexico Spaceport Authority, which is designed by the legislators to build up aerospace in the state of New Mexico. So that's our charge, and to run the spaceport. So here's a picture of what commercial spaceports and all the spaceports look like right now in the United States. So this is from the FAA website, and they, of course, are licensed spaceports. And you can see on this where all the spaceports are in the country. And there's a few private ones like Boca Chica and Van Horn, Texas for Blue Origin. But of course, you have the biggie, Kennedy Space Center, Vandenberg, and then you have the newer ones, the commercial spaceports like Spaceport America. Some of these are not really active in the space, going to space so much as they are in producing kind of an aerospace industrial park that could go to space. We're lucky at New Mexico because we have the room for a real spaceport, and we've been to space many times with our customers. So here's a picture of our 18,000 acres, and you can see in the lower part of that in the picture of New Mexico where we are located in New Mexico. So we're actually kind of literally in the middle of nowhere. We're surrounded by BLM land and very, very low population. And we have three areas: the horizontal launch area, which most people are familiar with. That's where we have the runway and Virgin Galactic operates. But in the video, you saw some other rocket launches that happens in our vertical launch area, which is about 5 miles away. And then we have this advanced technology area, which we kind of save for odd things like Kinetic Launch, like spin launch, what they're working on. And we're lucky. So you see the little red dot in the middle there on the lower left, that's the spaceport. But all of the blue over us is the restricted airspace of White Sands Missile Range. So the U.S. Army has run White Sands Missile Range since the 1940s. And shortly after World War II is when the V-2 rocket showed up with Wernher von Braun. That's where the birthplace of space is right in the middle of that. Where B-2s launched for many years before that program moved to Huntsville. But we're lucky, so we have this remote population, this remote area, low population, and we're directly under restricted airspace, which allows us to go from ground to infinity, as we like to say. Here's a smattering of the vehicles that have flown at Spaceport, and you saw some of those in the video a few minutes ago. And of course, if the atmosphere, if the Earth actually had, if this were to scale for the atmosphere, it'd be about the thickness of a piece of paper over the Earth, but we've expanded the atmosphere to kind of show where these objects, these different spaceships and objects have flown. Here's a picture of the horizontal launch area, and so really that's our 12,000-foot runway. It's 12,000 feet by 200 feet. It's not as big as the one in Kennedy, but we can plan to land some pretty good vehicles there. It's concrete. And next to it is the gateway to space, which Virgin Galactic operates out of. And here's a picture of what was originally called the terminal and hangar facility. And it's a combination of a terminal for passengers, and that's a hangar for the White Knight 2, the carrier aircraft, and the spaceship, and that made it a really complicated building to build. And also terminal hangar facility didn't sound nearly as good as gateway to space. So that's what it's called now. Here's a view looking toward the east, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, but we're next to the Camino Real, which is the trail that originally ran from Mexico City to Santa Fe and points further north. And this area out here has a beautiful viewshed that people wanted to preserve. So a lot of the buildings that we're trying to put out there, this building in particular, were designed to kind of fit into the landscape. And when you go out there and see it on a morning like this, when this picture was taken, you'll understand why it's a beautiful building. Of course, Virgin Galactic went to space twice this year, in May 22nd and July 11th with Sir Richard Branson. So those are some recent pictures. You can see the lower picture there getting ready to land on the runway. And here's a picture of it in front of the gateway to space. So the way that shot was taken on the very top, it kind of makes the gateway to space look small compared to the aircraft, but it's not. The gateway to space is 3 stories tall and has a floor for training, a floor for mission control and the astronauts, and another floor which is a kind of a lounge and a and a coffee shop. And then behind all that, behind all those windows is the hangar, which is shown in the lower right. And you can see the spaceship separated from the carrier aircraft. And as you saw in the video, we have lots of other things going on at Spaceport. So just real quickly, this is the Sun Glider. This is an AeroVironment aircraft that flies at, can fly up to 60,000 feet. It's solar powered and has batteries. It's designed to carry like a 5G cell tower underneath it, so to speak, the same kind of communications equipment. So that's flown a few times at Spaceport. I hope we're going to see that out there some more. We also host rocket launches, of course. This particular one is Up Aerospace, a customer who's been with us since 2005. Spin Launch is a brand new company that you should all hear about pretty soon. Their idea is to use what's called Kinetic Launch, which is basically to make the first stage of a rocket actually be kinetic. In other words, they throw something. And so in this case, they have a giant centrifuge that's going to spin an object up to Mach 5 and fling it into space. Now at Spaceport America, it's only going to be flung up to suborbital heights, but they have plans to build a bigger one somewhere else in the world, either on the equator or further north. The one they're building at Spaceport America is about 100 feet across. The one they want to build for orbital launches will be 300 feet across. It will actually carry a second stage rocket along with it. We have enough room, so we also do engine testing. So this is a recent customer, C6 Launch, is from Canada, and they were testing an engine made by Ursa Major of Colorado. And we did some other activities like rocket launches, university launches, and UAV, another high altitude UAV. A big thing I wanted to briefly mention was a Spaceport America Cup, which is a college level rocket contest. So all over the world and the country, they build rockets throughout the year. Then they come to Spaceport and launch them at predetermined heights and payloads. And it's a big, big competition. We're always looking for sponsors and looking for judges, people capable of deciding whether the rocket can fly safely or not. It's the third week of June. Please look it up, spaceportamericacup.com. And as you saw in our video, we also try and do a lot of workforce development in STEM. I think that's a very important thing, as I think all of us know is an important mission for each of our organizations. And that's all I've got. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was absolutely fascinating. I look forward to our conversation, and I had no idea you were doing so many dynamic activities at Spaceport America. Our next speaker is Andy Rechenberg. Andy.
Well, thanks, William. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk with the rest of these incredible thought leaders about the Kennedy Space Center Spaceport. When many people think about launches and spaceports, Kennedy Space Center is probably one of the first ones that they think about. And I'm here to talk to you about the Kennedy Space Center actually launching forward and becoming a multi-user spaceport. So when many people think of a rocket launch, this is what they think of, the images that you're seeing on the screen. The historic Saturn V rocket that took humans to the moon in the 1960s and 70s. If you grew up in the 80s and the 90s like me, the space shuttle is your baby like mine. I took these images at the last launch of Space Shuttle Discovery back in 2011. This is what many people think, but just like right now, people think about airport is it's a common term in our vernacular. Back in the early 1900s, that was not a term that was used. And I really think that spaceport is going to be like that term airport. In the next decade or two, people are just going to talk about going to the spaceport. So it's a really exciting time to be in the spaceflight industry. And KSC is a multi-user spaceport. Obviously, NASA uses all of the infrastructure that was built up over the years to launch our launch vehicles and programs. The historic Launch Complex 39B is where the NASA SLS will be launching here soon. But we also have a number of folks at the spaceport. We have our commercial partners, SpaceX, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. We're building Launch Complex 48, which is for new small launch vehicles. Sierra Nevada Corporation, our corporate customers like Blue Origin and smaller new space like Firefly Aerospace. and Space Florida manages the shuttle landing facility. So it truly is not just a NASA facility now, but it is a multi-user spaceport. Just to give you some statistics about what's going on around the spaceport, through the next few years, the commercial crew program, we've had successful launches in the last year. In the next few years, we're going to have up to 11 launches for the commercial crew program. Exciting time to be part of that program. Our launch services program, if a company needs or has the need for launch services, they need to understand how a launch vehicle, what type of launch vehicle they might need, or launch loads. Our launch service program can help those folks out. Up to 20 launches in the next few years, and obviously our exploration ground systems program down at Kennedy Space Center. Those are the folks that are building and supporting all the infrastructure that will support the Artemis launches, and up to 3 launches in the next few years for that program. So super exciting times, can't wait to see that. Also, upcoming programs, program that's close and near and dear to my heart, the Gateway program, work with those folks a lot, and it's super exciting that we'll be able to launch those vehicles, the habitation and logistics outpost and the power and propulsion element in the next few years, get out to the lunar facility so our astronauts can have a lunar home away from home, if you will. And we always have the International Space Station doing science for exploration so that we can test those systems close to home so that we can use them out around the lunar vicinity and past onto Mars. And exploration, research, and technology doing a lot of science launches in the next few years, up to 50 launches. So again, a lot of activity going down at the spaceport down at Kennedy. And we'll just go through some of the missions that have launched in the last few years. It's almost been a year now. Can't believe it's been that long since the Crew 1 launch. First operational launch, crewed mission from American soil since the space shuttle. First night launch since the retirement of the space shuttle. So a lot of great work by Hopkins and the crew there. Our SpaceX Crew 2 is currently on orbit, doing a lot of great science. Thomas Pesquet is currently, he just assumed command of the International Space Station, so doing great work with our European Space Agency partners there. And if you like Halloween, like I do, got my Halloween decorations up in the back here, the SpaceX Crew 3 launch is currently set to launch on early morning. I've got my pass. I'm gonna head down there. So if you've got your astronaut costumes for trick-or-treating, put them on and get up early to watch the Crew 3 launch. And like I was saying earlier, our launch services program has a very large manifest of mostly science payloads. Last week, we saw the launch of Lucy going out to some Trojan asteroids in Lagrange points around Jupiter. The Landsat 9 is continuing our Earth observation science. Exciting that launched, and the IPXE is another X-ray science payload that's going to be launching here in December. And we couldn't forget the big dog, the big rocket. SLS, the Space Launch System, has been integrated and stacked in the vehicle assembly building down at Kennedy Space Center. The picture you see here was taken a few days ago, actually. So Orion, the spacecraft, along with the launch abort system integrated on top, has actually been soft mated on Tuesday and hard mated yesterday. So we are almost ready to go, and I cannot wait to see that launch. And to close it out, I thought I'd show a little bit of a video about all of the great things heading down at Kennedy Space Center.
The tower is clear.
tell you what, that gives me goosebumps. If you have never seen a rocket launch, put it on your bucket list. Whether it's at Kennedy, KSC down in Florida, Spaceport America, any of the launch sites around the nation and around the world, absolutely put a rocket launch on your bucket list because it is an experience. You feel it. If you have any questions about Kennedy Space Center, you've got the URL there. You can always Google NASA KSC or NASA. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Just Google my name, and I can. If I don't know the answer, I will get the right person for you. So thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be on the panel. So I'm going to hand it back to William. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Andy. Boy, what an adrenaline rush watching that video. So much exciting things happening in both New Mexico and in Florida. Now I'm delighted to welcome our third panelist, Cherie Matthews. Cherie.
Hello, and I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I could talk about space and what's happening in the space industry all day, every day. And so I'm just really excited to be part of this panel. It's just so fun to see all of the things that our country's capable of. And one thing that I really wanted to talk about today was just really what's Corgan's part of this story and why am I here in this panel talking to you. And what that is really we wanted to talk to you about our vision for spaceports. So basically what we're doing on really kind of our exploration of spaceports. I know when William introduced me earlier, we talked about kind of how Corgan is a pioneer in the spaceport industry as a designer. So Scott shows you Spaceport America, which is the first purpose-built spaceport, and a lot of the other spaceports that he saw is similar, a little bit similar to the picture that you see today, but definitely not as pretty. So a lot of the spaceports today are launch pads and rocket launches, and really about form and function. What can we do to get the rocket up and efficiently, quickly, and that makes a lot of sense. That's where we are today. We're really focusing on the spacecraft and how do we get to the moon and then to Mars, and how do we do that with everyday citizens eventually, and how is that going to happen? So what we started to do was really kind of talk about with a vision of what that might look like. At first, we looked at the launch pad and we thought, okay, if, as architects with our architecture hat, can we start to give this kind of a simple elegance and start to attract people to those spaceports and watch the rocket launch, because that's definitely on my bucket list for sure, especially after that video. What we saw was, so I've been in aviation for 14 years, and one of the big parts of aviation architecture is human experience. We try to make people, as stress-free as possible when traveling. We want to make sure that not only are you on your way to your destination, but you enjoy the journey from buying your ticket all the way to destination and then back home again. And we saw that we could start to use a lot of that experience and apply it to the spaceport, because you can see ever since July, when their commercial tourism has essentially started, is that not all of these people are trained as astronauts. And I couldn't even imagine if I was going to go to space tomorrow, how would I react? And so really looking into the astronaut's life, their lifestyle, what does that mean for the everyday person, and how can we make them comfortable when even embarking on this journey? So what we started to do is we kind of honed it into some design principles so that we could develop a concept of what that future spaceport might look like. And a lot of it is about hope and preservation. Not only are we looking to go to higher boundaries and beyond, but we're also hoping to take some of the lessons learned and apply them back to Earth. And whatever we can do up in space, also helping the Earth as well. So it's a lot about preserving the Earth and what can we do now to help for a better future for generations. Future of aviation, connectivity, a lot of flexibility and phasing, because these aren't really going to happen just tomorrow, and I'll go in a little bit more detail in that. And then human-centric design, that's really where we feel like architects can start to help understand what the spaceport experience needs to be and help develop that message for spaceport directors everywhere. And then safety, of course, and clean and futuristic. So you can see this is one of our first images that we started to see as a campus. And what we wanted to do is we didn't really want to limit ourselves to vertical and or horizontal launches. We wanted to put both in there and see what that campus might look like. And once we took it with a really clean aviation eye and tried to see the expertise in it, we started to see that this world opened up so much more. It becomes more of a campus in a micro city, and that's kind of where we saw where you would need wellness centers and health and education centers, and really anything that would attract the local community to come to this. And not only are people going to visit to eventually go into space, but also be here to be inspired by space and by STEM. And this is really just a campus overview. You'll see vertical launch areas coupled with horizontal launch areas. A lot of spaceports right now have to choose because that's just kind of where we are today, but eventually we see a lot of them starting to co-locate, as well as rocket factories, wellness center, like I mentioned earlier. Education is going to be a big part, which we'll get into more details. An airport terminal, if we can use the existing infrastructure, much like the Houston Spaceport does today, and then cargo facilities. So again, what I want to reiterate, it's kind of hard for a lot of people to think about, just having a passenger terminal like you would an airport for a spaceport. But just like Andy said, I feel like that's going to be everywhere, and that's really our vision. And what's crazy about that fact is that we have to start planning for today. A campus like that can take up to 10 to 15 years, and we really need to have that plan in place and know what that vision is and where we're going to go. And so we would develop the campus phase by phase and eventually get to the passenger terminal whenever the revenue and the demand made it feasible. But we want to make sure that we're starting today to make that design and have those plans so that we can get to the overall vision together. And then these are just some artist renderings that we have and what we envisioned. First, the rocket factory. I know that's a lot of what happens today because that's exactly what we need. We're focusing on this spacecraft. We have a lot of short-term goals in our nation, and we're going to need rocket factories to get there. And this is a cargo facility. I know Amazon, has briefly mentioned getting packages to the moon, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other people in enterprise trying to get the cargo out to space, and what would that look like in the future. And so this is just an artist rendering that we have. And then we start to really go into the passenger terminal and what that could be. And what that is really, we start seeing ourselves rooted in the terrestrial and reminding yourself of gravity and Earth. And then as you move towards your destination, towards where you're going to go, you can start to see the futuristic hold room. So not really the airport hold room that we have today, but a lot about serving the individual. There's probably not going to be as many people that are going to space, at least in the beginning. And so we really see this as an individualized experience, more kind of a prepackaged experience that you could buy, and really your whole journey starts from when you buy your ticket, and then we see it actually transforming you. So once you do get to have this experience, you take that with you forever. And how do we at the spaceport use that built environment and really accentuate that experience that you'll have? And this slide is right before we go into more about education, is just really talking about how, a different look at the concessions and things that you'll start to see, because basically we're going to need to rethink everything. You might not be able to eat a burger right before you go into zero gravity. That might be a bad idea from what I've heard. So what does that mean? How do we cater to the individual? How do we make them comfortable? And how do we provide them concessions and amenities without really compromising their wellness and safety while they take their trip? So I'll pass the presentation to Sangeetha now to talk to you more about education today and how is that changing.
Thank you, Cherie. That was exciting. Hello, everyone. My name is Sangeetha Karthik, and my background is actually education architecture. And education has been my passion for over 20 years now. And so when Cherie and I started talking about spaceports and integrating a STEM component to it, we wanted to have a baseline, a place to start. So we wanted to really look at where education is today. If you don't have elementary age children, you will be surprised to see how folks are learning in classrooms today. It's very, very different. For those of us that have looked at textbooks and learned about planets in 2D, like the next image, you'll see that that's not what's happening today. 2D textbooks are a thing of the past, and you really don't connect with the student of today using 2D images. So what educators across the country and across the globe are using are these 3D technologies that are easily available for students to make it very immersive and engaging. And what's exciting about this is there is an equity component that comes into it where the way the student learn is very personalized and they are able to connect with the subject matter. So here you see a teacher that is teaching his class about all of the planets and everything that's happening around it, just to make sure that there is an in-depth understanding and the learning is more immersive. So if you remember how you learned about pyramids, this is how we learn it. So if there's anything important that we need to remember, you have to highlight and memorize it. And funny enough, that's not how kids these days learn. So every time we looked into the spaceports and tried to understand how the education components could be integrated so it could be engaging, it could become a destination. Even if you're not traveling to space, we wanted to make sure that we look into the lessons of today. So how kids learn today the best is through gamification. So they really have control over how they move through all these spaces. It's a very immersive 4D experience in some cases. And instead of trying to highlight and learn, you're actually inside the environment, trying to understand how everything inside a pyramid works. Instead of trying to memorize, this is how you're going to learn the maps and how everything was put together and really connect with the subject matter. So in looking into higher education environments and how students of today are learning, we wanted to make sure that all of the technologies that are in place today are being used to the fullest extent. And as the other panelists have discussed in the past, we know that there's a huge potential for workforce and new industries that are going to emerge from the spaceports themselves. So what can we do to make sure that the STEM education reaches the students of today so they can be prepared for the workforce of tomorrow? So we look to how education is being done today, especially in CTE, STEM type of environments. So the first thing we learn in these type of environments, it is very exploration driven and it's all about innovation. And so you've got all these environments that are completely untethered, where students can come up with ideas, quickly ideate, do several iterations, and really build what they're trying to do. And we want to encourage students of the future for the future industries to do this. The other important aspect we want to look at the education environment in a spaceport is really understand what the job opportunities are going to be. We want to make sure that all of the technologies are in place, and we know that the industries are going to be in the spaceport. So that is a direct connection between the student and the workforce, and so thus creating a pipeline. So we do this today in a lot of our CTE and STEM environments is really the real world settings. We want to be able to connect students to application driven scenarios. So whether it's on the Earth or in the space or anywhere in between, we want to make sure that they are in an environment that kind of emulates the scenario that they are trying to figure out the problem in. So as we always say, environments do cue behavior. So we want to make sure that all of the amenities are provided in the education environments in the spaceports so the students can explore and innovate. What we often look at is really the design thinking process. So any of the spaces that we are going to be designing is going to be conducive for exploration and learning. This idea of being able to inspire the student, then they can ideate and quickly implement is what we are trying to do. We are also keenly aware that there's going to be a lot of cross-curricular specialties that are going to need to be encouraged in these type of environments. And so in a spaceport, we want to make sure that the kids can ideate and quickly implement the ideas. So if we look at classrooms today, what do they have? So we are going to take this to the next level, if you will, in the spaceport and have a multifaceted scenario where we are able to overlay VR and AR onto it. So you can think of a student with a VR goggles in front of a green screen, coupled with an AR experience, so they can actually see themselves in space or in another planet, trying to solve a problem that could help in space travel. So you're going to see the VR and the motion tracking as well as the AR in these type of classrooms. So when you go into these classrooms, we're also looking at a scenario where we will be able to couple these with an augmented reality component. So they could actually interact with another global classroom, which is another spaceport, or possibly some of the astronauts that are already in space. So this immersive experience allowed the students to really understand all of the different scenarios that they can experience. So here they are, you could imagine them actually interacting with students from across the globe or somewhere in space. So when we look at the education environment in a spaceport, one of the things that we're keenly aware of is this idea that we don't know what to expect in the future. So we want to be able to design something that's very flexible, that will instill collaboration, cross-curricular learning, but at the same time be able to flex and adapt over time, so all of the technologies that come available in the future can be easily implemented. This is kind of our concept design for the education space that we might end up seeing in a spaceport. And this is very similar to a black box type of scenario. So if you could imagine a space where there is a combination of technology as well as tactile tools where students can interact with students and other folks across the globe, but also have a multi-sensory experience. We are actually seeing a lot of this in higher education facilities today, not at this scale, but some scale. So we are envisioning something that could be scaled up in a spaceport. The other important thing that we are kind of focusing on in this particular concept design is really this idea of multi-generational learning, cross-curricular collaboration, but also this idea that this is something that any student can do. This is accessible to anyone. So we may not be able to travel to space today, but at some point I can get there. This idea that science is cool and knowledgeable is accessible to all. Again, so I think what we are very excited about are all the possibilities. Just watching some of the videos were really exciting. But I think it's important for students to understand where they fit into this big puzzle, if you will, that you cannot be what you can't see. So in this case, you actually are interacting with scientists and researchers and astronauts in a very typical setting. So this could be a day trip for a student, and they can come back with so much more than what you could even get from an AR or a VR experience. And so Cherie talked a lot about how the spaceport, in our mind and our concept, is going to be a destination. So we really like this idea of this indoor, outdoor type of learning environment where, again, you have industry partners, scientists, and everyday students kind of interacting, testing out ideas, being able to iterate and be able to come up with new solutions. Again, we always talk about how sports is so popular among kids. It's because it's always accessible. You see it everywhere. So our idea is to make science and STEM education more accessible. Something that like this would make it very popular among students. So as we look into these environments, we are always very keen on trying to understand what a student learns today and how it is going to fit into their future that would actually dictate the global economy. So we are trying to understand what the workforce of tomorrow is going to be and what it needs to be. So as we look at these scenarios, we understand that there is a question of the talent, but there's also a need that is always kind of driving the workforce and the pipeline of today. So when we design these environments, we often look at what the future jobs are going to be, because that kind of gives us cues on what the education environments of today need to be. So we are looking at the idea that there is something that's required from the knowledge component, but there's also something required in terms of what the industry needs, as well as what each student needs in terms of personalizing the education for them. So the future job list that we always look at every time we design a new building, just because really there are some cues in here, because if we keep designing doing today, we are not preparing our students for space travel and space exploration. So these are some of the jobs, and the two that I want to highlight are really 1 and 4. And so again, space farming is something that has been talked about. It's something very exciting, and I know one of our panelists talked about payloads before and how 3D printing has kind of really transformed the payloads in space travel. So space farming is one that is one of the future jobs. I believe this is on the list for 2030. And then my favorite is actually number 4, which is the mixed reality artist. So you can imagine someone like this being able to bring the wellness component of it that Cherie had talked about, making sure that you're not stressed, or if you are, then you have a space you can go and decompress. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cherie.
Thank you, Sangeetha. And myself, I do have 2 young sons, so I can't wait to see if they become space farmers. It's very fun to figure out what kind of jobs will be out there for them and watch them as they grow. So Sangeetha described perfectly of how we see an education facility happening at the spaceport, and how the education environment that we're experiencing today and in the near future can really benefit spaceports as well. And one thing that we really wanted to emphasize too to everyone is that we want to make the spaceport a STEM-centric landmark. We don't really want to just open it up to the people that are ticket holders, much like an airport is today, but take it back to what the airport used to be, where everybody got to go and watch the planes take off. We want to make this a center where people can come and watch rockets. This is a great place to show innovative technologies and really inspire the surrounding communities on what could be and how they can better their local environments. These images just really show kind of the different facilities that we see. We want to make sure that they are open to everyone. Again, not just the ticket holders. We see local communities, visitors from near and far coming to these as a destination, and not only the traveling public. And as Sangeetha talked about too, really just the black box of what we can do with the learning and tools that we have available and apply them to the spaceport and its natural surroundings. And so this really shows you kind of a future look of what that might be, where classes are held, different demographics can come and utilize the space at all times during the day. And one thing too that we really kind of wanted to start to touch on, again, we talked a lot about what's happening in the education today. And I know that everybody's kind of feeling it today with the shortage in workforce, but how do we really kind of fast track that workforce training? A lot of these spaceports are in rural communities that we can start to use as a conduit to give people jobs in these areas. And how do we train them quicker, faster, make sure that it's efficient and effective? And we see that stemming from the education and tools that we have from VR and augmented reality. And how do we really kind of, have that building environment start to shape towards different training sessions that you would need as an astronaut? And that's what you can kind of see in the next 2 slides. So if an astronaut was in a static room and you could just program the space to actually manipulate and transform the terrain that you need to train on, then you would see a mix of AR and VR and what we call an immersive reality, where you're starting to experience the space around you. You feel what you need to feel so that you can be prepared for any type of situation that you would be in when you are actually in space. And what I wanted to end on really was just talking about how Sangeetha said, you know, we can build these spaces and bring everybody to the spaceport. We don't even really have to have them physically there. We can build auditoriums where astronauts give talks and they can be projected as holograms, or this could be a whole new world of training. And really what we want to do is highlight that the workforce is there, needs to be there, and how do we get them there, and how do we inspire the local communities to take part in the spaceport? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Cherie and Sangeetha. Very thought-provoking, because you really talked beyond what anyone thought of as a spaceport. You know, which I think traditionally we thought this is a place where there are opportunities to launch into space and return from space exploration. But I mean, this is a very new concept of a spaceport being a gathering place. And I think very much with Spaceport America, you're doing that, right? You're living this vision of being a community convening location. And I think that's really very, very fascinating. And it is interesting now that we're living in a time where space tourism has begun, right? As of this year, we have people who are as passengers going into space and having these amazing experiences. So I'm curious, do you see spaceports continuing to evolve? You know, interestingly, I was on a flight recently in United Airlines, and they're promoting that they've purchased 50 jets from Boom that are supersonic. Would spaceports be a location where supersonic jets take off and land?
Well, I'll kind of take that one, I guess, and then anybody please chime in. But we've actually started to talk to several spaceports, and that's one of the things that they want us to not rule out. Again, we've planned for vertical and horizontal launches occurring, and what that hopefully means is that we're kind of future-proofing their spaceport. Basically, we're giving the opportunity to plan for everything that might occur in the next 50 years. And sonic boom flight is definitely happening. Again, I'm in the aviation industry, so we definitely track that, and that's something that we're starting to look into as well. Not only for them to be at airports, but what that means for the spaceport too.
Maybe Scott, do you have a thought on that? Because in your spaceport.
Yeah. When you start talking about supersonic, and then you can talk about hypersonic, and then you start talking about point to point, you know, and then future proofing is a good idea, but of course, sometimes being the first isn't always the best, you know, because you can see the designs that Cherie talked about are well thought out, and a lot of the spaceports are built on old hardware, old designs, old thoughts, and ours, you know, Spaceport America was purpose built, but it was still centered around kind of a single customer, at least to start, even though we have all these other areas. So it's going to be really interesting to see what a spaceport looks like. At first, you know, rockets are still considered dangerous, right? To get a 747 certified, to get a new plane certified, there's an incredible amount of work, but there's kind of a waiver process for what's going on right now with space tourism. The tourists are accepting higher risk than you would if you were on a 737, for example. So it's going to be a while before a spaceport is like an airport, but I think we all can imagine that it's going to happen. It's just a question of when.
Very interesting. Andy, what are your thoughts? Because I know we were involved here in helping test a new wing design that was being developed out at NASA Ames and Armstrong, and now they're not saying it's a sonic boom, they're calling it a puff, right, because of the new design, so it's not as disruptive of the air. Is that something that Kennedy Spaceport is looking at?
Kennedy specifically not, however, I'm in a systems engineering leadership program. That's how I'm in my current position at Kennedy. And there are a few people in my program that are working on the low boom demonstrator. So I definitely can see supersonic travel, and just like Scott said, point to point travel really taking off in the next, you know, decade or two. I think, just as Cherie and Sangeetha were talking about, the multi-use function is going to be key. I like the idea that they built up around an airport so that supersonic travel could be the start of their vision, and then move on to point-to-point travel, suborbital travel, and things of that nature.
Well, Scott, something in your remarks caught my attention, which was this centrifuge launch and the kinetic energy at 5G. Is that something that would be for cargo, or would it be for humans? Because that's a lot of pressure to be spun around and then thrust into space at 5G.
Yeah, that's only for cargo, and it's only for something that's been qualified. But the idea of using kinetic launch goes, back many decades. And there was actually a program in the 60s that tried to build a very large gun, essentially, to get something up in the at least suborbital space, and they got pretty high. So this new customer spin launch is instead of using a rail or a gun, they're using a centrifuge. So they just spin something faster and faster and faster until they just let it go. Of course, they got to let it go precisely. But high G's are not good for humans. But if something is designed, correctly in material, then it will be okay even 10,000 G's. And keep in mind that something like this makes a lot more sense if you think about it being on the moon or being in orbit. If you're trying to do mining of an asteroid or something, right? You could use solar panels to spin something up. And so kinetic launch in all its various forms is going to have a future someday. We'll move away from chemical launches, at least for some types of launches.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. It feels like it takes us back to Roman times with the catapult or something of that nature. But I guess it's basic principles of physics, right?
That's
to
right.
look at how this works. It is absolutely fascinating. I wanted to go back to Cherie and Sangeetha, and I was loving your listing of careers of the future, because we're a STEM learning institution. We're very focused on that. We actually do use both augmented and virtual reality in our education classrooms and instructions with our youth. And I love some of the positions of the future. My favorite was the simplicity expert, because I could use that person now. I think we have so many complexities in our lives and where we're going into the future. And I'm just curious, are you prototyping some of those concepts with AR and VR and STEM learning?
That's a great question, but so the short answer is no, because what we try to do is when we work with education institutions, regardless of the age of students, that the learners that they are focusing on, we try to present all these ideas. As you can imagine, it's really a resource allocation problem. So depending on the type of school or a higher education institution, but what we try to do really is that build in some of the infrastructure today, because we know that some of these technologies are if you would, on the bleeding edge, but very quickly they're going to become affordable. What is interesting about the pandemic is some of the stuff that was completely out of the realm of possibility in a public school, say today, is totally possible in Texas because of what's happened and how quickly the technology has improved in the last 18 months, and really understanding what the students can kind of handle, right? It's all the adults that can't, manage between the different platforms, between the Zooms and the team. But the kids today can. But at the same time, we've also understood, especially the younger kids, because there's a lot of studies that are going to be tracking students that entered kindergarten in the year 2020, because there's going to be a lot of data that's going to be collected, because when they graduate, there's going to be a profound impact that the pandemic had on these kids. But back to your question, what we try to do is we really try to present all these scenarios to all of our education clients, whether it's K-12 or it's higher education, and just help them understand. We're often inspired talking to folks like you and really engaging with our industry partners, because sometimes, like I said, you can't get something just because you think it's not possible, but sometimes it's just a couple of conduits and a few wires and 5 5 years down the line, it's available on Amazon, and so that's kind of been our strategy. But these kind of inspiring sessions kind of really help motivate us. But Cherie actually presented in one of the education conferences about 2 weeks ago, just showing the educators how these connections and possibilities are possible, where the kids can learn a lot through technology.
It's absolutely fascinating. I know that it just underscores how adaptable we are, right? And when we're given different challenges and just our capacity to kind of learn and figure things out. And all of us, maybe we've had elderly parents and like, how do I use my mobile phone? And you ask the kid, right? Because the kid will know how to do it. So that's often the way that it is. So I'm curious about we of course and at Spaceport America, you've had a big client with Virgin Galactic and very successfully launching. Are you aware if they're advancing or looking at new technologies to improve what they've begun to do with taking tourists into space?
Well, they're building a second spaceship. They announced that, I think even a year or two ago, and they expect to be back with the second spaceship. The second spaceship is, the first one you might think of as a Pathfinder. It's been to space and it's successfully done what it's done, but it was the first one, right? So the second one is going to be more purposeful, built for maintenance, for quick flights. And then in terms of their point-to-point, they've announced that they would like to focus on point-to-point, just as other aerospace companies are, because that would be the ultimate market. Space tourism is fun, but you really want to get into some other markets like cargo. The military's talked about getting cargo around the world very quickly, and so there's some applications for point-to-point. So we'll be working with Virgin Galactic, but looking for other customers as well.
Are there spaceports in other parts of the world?
Yeah, there are many spaceports, and in fact, China is starting to work on what they call a commercial spaceport, and there are other commercial spaceports being developed in the UK and other places. And again, the focus is, the Kennedy Space Center, it will always be in everybody's heart, right? That's where everybody saw the biggest things happening, and they're continuing to grow. It's incredible what Kennedy Space Center is doing, but the other spaceports are a little bit more like Spaceport America. They're either repurposed, some of them are brand new though. They're being purpose designed. So somebody like Corrigan gets to have the fun job of imagining from the ground up what a spaceport should look like.
Oh, I guess it's something that can replace container ships would be pretty awesome. It's it's a big challenge that we're facing now, and it's I guess a very slow way to move cargo, but I guess it would be much more expensive to do it by supersonic or by some kind of other kind of space transportation. Absolutely fascinating. Andy, I'm curious, how are you able to balance all of this activity at the Kennedy Space Center Spaceport? You were sharing with us that you've got vertical and horizontal launch, and of course you have commercial partners now who are very active and rapidly growing. Who manages or coordinates all of the activity and determines the priorities on these launches and use of your facilities?
It's a group of folks. So the configuration management program in which I work, it's a center-wide program. So a lot of the things that our program does ensures that when somebody is making a change, where we're making lots of changes or our commercial partners are making changes, that those are documented well and that people know what's happening. So it's really a tough integration problem, and we've got folks from, like I said, the launch services program, the exploration ground systems, and like the configuration management program, looking over all of the things that are happening at Kennedy Space Center. And that's what we're trying to help do, is ensure that when those things need to change and change rapidly, that things are documented properly, follow the correct process. A lot of people, discount the policy and process, but that's really how you basically you slow down to go fast, and Kennedy Space Center is doing a lot of that. So we need to document those things that are happening and ensure that people have access to information, so that if they need to do something make a change, that information is accurate so that we don't impact our other customers and other partners. So it's a very tough integration job, and our folks down there are just incredible at what they do.
Amazing. This has been a fascinating conversation with all of you, and we're actually approaching the end of our time. It feels like it has just flown past, but I want to give you each a moment to just share some final thoughts. Maybe we'll start with Cherie.
Well, like I said, we're just very excited to be a part of this. And like Scott said, it is very exciting for Corgan to be on the ground and get to run with this, because we are the people envisioning what a spaceport can be, along with other spaceport directors. So we definitely are taking our expertise and helping others really develop their message and what they want to see for their spaceport, and what we can start to do for their local communities and regions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sangeetha.
Thank you. This is a very exciting journey. As we talked about before, we know that the spaceports are going to become like the airports of tomorrow, and being able to integrate STEM education and really charter a course for our students so we can have our workforce ready, our work pipeline in place when those technologies of the future arrive is a really exciting time. So Corgan and the Corgan education team is very excited to be a part of this. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Andy.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to sit down and listen to these great, innovative and thoughtful leaders in the spaceport industry. KSC has been around since the 60s and before, and we're just getting started with our commercial partners. So we can't wait to make that journey with them and see where the spaceport goes in the future, and hopefully integrate some of those innovative concepts like STEM education and viewing opportunities into the KSC spaceport. So thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Of course, you know, I think it's good to back up and take even a more national perspective, right? And you know what somebody can imagine, somebody can build, and what a nation can imagine, a nation can build. And we saw that in the 60s, but we're in a whole new era now, and we're not just a few spaceports and a few new private companies, which are exciting, SpaceX and Blue Origin. We're competing against the whole world. And it's important that we as a nation put some energy and force behind this to make sure we stay leaders, or we will be left behind economically and technologically. It's easy to sort of take things for granted, because that's kind of what we do as Americans. Sometimes we kind of look at what we've done and say, what have we done? But I think it's important to think of this as a strategic move by the country, and we can't lose sight of that kind of 100,000-foot view, or that orbital view, if it were. So thank you for allowing me to be here. It's good to tell the story. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. It was absolutely a fascinating conversation. And really, this is giving us a view into the future. And I learned so much today, and I'm sure that our audience will as well. For more information about this topic, follow Space Center Houston on our social media, and check out our Space Center Houston blog, spacecenter.org, where you can actually watch this program. It will be recorded and available for the next year. Again, thank you to our panelists, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Thought Leader program.